You got a dog?
Yeah, two of them, and apparently they hear your voice and it's
Nice.
like, "What's going on, Leo?"
Nice.
That's enough. I don't know. Maybe
Well,
hopefully
yeah,
they
no, you're totally fine. Yeah.
hopefully they behave. If not, I'll have to move them somewhere. Leo,
No worries.
that's
Yeah.
enough. Okay.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat. Let's just start. Let's just start with who you are and kind of what you do.
Well, that's pretty broad statement, I guess, Mitch. I'm from Grand Island originally, and grew up here. Went to Kinnickrum and Lincoln Elementary School, then to Walnut, and then over to senior high, and graduated and went to the University of Nebraska. Came back here. Have called Grand Island my home pretty much my entire life, and involved with a lot of different things, obviously, just over the course of time, whether it's coaching, just involved in the community, just leadership, developing youth. I work in finance, and so I've worn a lot of hats, let's put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's a lot I want to get into. One of the things I'm really curious about is your time. You were on the Nebraska football team for a little bit, correct?
I was, yes.
Okay. I remember this because I was at Barr Middle School, 2011, 12-ish, and I remember you came and talked to us. I was went to seventh and eighth grade there. We moved to Grand Islands. Give me like the quick blurb story on kind of that part of your life.
Well, very impactful in a lot of ways. When I was coming out of high school, I didn't play football until I was a junior in high school. And as a junior and senior, we had a nice program, and Ken Fisher built quite a program here in Grand Island. And going into my senior year, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, to be honest with you. And to make a long story short, I had the opportunity to walk on and kind of live every Nebraska boy's dream of having a white helmet with a red N on it, and was able to be a part of the team for 3.5 years. In 1994, which would have been my junior year, had a really good spring and actually had an interception of my good friend Brick Behringer in the red-white game. Walked out of spring practice that year, number 3 on the depth chart at free safety. But I had made some pretty poor financial decisions while I was in college. My family didn't have much money, and I was given the opportunity to get credit cards, and I didn't know how to use them. And next thing I know, I had a lot of bill collectors coming after me, and so by the time we got to that summer 1994, I couldn't stick around in Lincoln and be part of the summer workouts. I came back to Grand Island and worked at New Holland. And I needed to do everything I could to save money and try to pay off some of that debt. And, as the summer went, it just became apparent to me that football wasn't going to be in my future, because at that point in time, way before NIL and some of these other rules have changed, you couldn't have a job as a walk-on player while you were also a part of the football team, because it would have been a way for universities to skirt scholarship rules and stuff. And so I couldn't work, but I didn't have any money. And so I made the decision in the summer of '94 to voluntarily walk away from the team. And obviously that, if you know anything about Husker history, that was quite a decision that I made. That year my team goes and wins the first national championship for Coach Osborne. And I remember sitting in my apartment in Lincoln, literally with a 12-pack of beer and by myself, and I literally was in tears after that game was over when the Huskers beat Miami, because I couldn't believe the circumstances that I was in, and I voluntarily walked away from being a part of a national championship team. And I really struggled with it. I could have used it as motivation, I think, or an excuse, not motivation, but an excuse to kind of go down a different path. I had some really good friends that obviously were teammates, and I was happy for them, but by the same token, I was seeing them go to all of the national championship celebrations and understanding that they were going to be a part of Husker lure for essentially for all time. And I actually thought about transferring too. I was like, I got to get out of here. But, a couple of my buddies said, hey, no, you got to stick around and, you're still part of this. And then 1995 came, and all they did was went back to back and beat the crap out of the Gators in the Fiesta Bowl, and that would have been part of my team too. But I will tell you, reality really hit me shortly thereafter that game when good friend Brooke Behringer was killed in the plane accident, and suddenly thinking about all the things that were bothersome to me didn't quite have the weight that it did prior to. And so, I guess you use that then as motivation, as something to keep you going, but also to if this was the path that I was led down, I was dealt those cards. Now I've got to play them to the best of my ability. And so that's what I've done ever since then. And it's really, I've been asked a lot of times, if I could go back and change it, what have I changed the decision that I made to step away? And the answer is no. I mean, it really drove me to become the person that I was. I don't know where my life would have taken me if I would have been a part of the football team and stayed that way. But having that chip on my shoulder really was something that guided me for the next 30 or so years of my life so far.
Yeah. Wow. What happened after college then? So is that part of the reason why you're in finance now? Is that kind of like, how did that all come to
Yeah,
be?
the irony is I showed up on the campus at the University of Nebraska as an architectural major. That's kind of what I thought I wanted to do. And after a short period of time, I realized that I couldn't be a football player and an architect. I mean, it was just going to be too hard with all the lab schedules and things. And I guess I wasn't that passionate about being an architect. I wanted to be a football player. And so I kind of searched, and over the course of the first couple of years there, I was the typical general studies kid. I had no idea where my path was going to lead. Funny thing is I watched the movie Wall Street with Charlie Sheen, and I thought, you know what, being a stockbroker, being a financial advisor, something like that, kind of sounded sexy and kind of cool at the time. And so I just started kind of going down that path, and shortly after college, so I ended up with both a finance and an economics degree, and I didn't know exactly for sure what that was going to entail, but getting into the business was definitely tough. And being a finance major and wanting to be a financial advisor while I was having my barn was on fire myself in terms of finances. I mean, I was still, on the verge of bankruptcy, but I was just trying to figure out a way to keep my head above water. And fortunately, some people gave me an opportunity to work for them and kind of learn the business and kind of build my practice. And I've been very fortunate. Definitely have had some people that have further motivated me along the way. And so that was really important.
Yeah, 100%. So did you move back to Grand Island right after college, or like what was your early like 20s and your early years of your career
Yeah, it
like?
was. So I'd really planned to take a job with a brokerage out of Lincoln. And of all things, my high school soccer coach called me and asked me if I would have any interest in being a college men's soccer coach. And I kind of laughed, and I was like, Dan, I'm very flattered that you would think of me, but he had given my name to the athletic director at Hastings College, and they were interested in bringing me in to do an interview to talk about taking over the Hastings College men's soccer team. And I'm just out of college myself, and I didn't go to Hastings College, so I mean it was a little bizarre to me, but yeah, I took the interview primarily out of respect to my high school coach that thought enough of me. So I drove back from Lincoln to Hastings, met with the athletic director, a gentleman by the name of Bob Borichter, and Bob was a wonderful guy, and we were talking about a lot of things, and I think he sensed that I wasn't really that excited about being a Hastings College employee, not only from the coaching standpoint, but they also wanted me to work for the university and bring students in. And I just told him, I said, I want to be a stockbroker. That's really and so he literally spun around in his chair. He picked up the phone and he called his broker in Hastings. And he said, Pat, I've got a guy here that I'm trying to hire as our men's soccer coach. He thinks he wants to be a stockbroker. Would you visit with him? And so he hangs up the phone and he gives me the instructions of where to go. And I'm all suited up and I got a resume and I got all this, with me. And he hands my resume back to me and he said, "Here, give this to Pat." I said, "Well, don't you need this?" And he goes, "I know everything I need to know about you. Give this to Pat and we'll see kind of where this goes." And so I drove downtown to Hastings and I walked in and I met with Bob Borchter, stockbroker, and visited with him for about 2 hours. About 2 weeks later, the firm that Pat worked for that was based out of Chicago, they called and they offered me a job. And I went back to Pat and I said, "Pat, I'm really kind of in a pickle right now. Can I be a college soccer coach and a stockbroker both?" And he said, "Yeah, Jeremy, you can, but you won't be worth a damn at either one of them." And so with that, then I had to make a decision. And I called Bob Borchter and thanked him immensely for both the opportunity that he gave me at Hastings College, but also for introducing me to Pat. And Bob said, "You're not going to be my soccer coach, are you?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm going to be your broker." And so I lived in Grand Island. I worked in Hastings for a couple of years. After that, I was always in Grand Island, and that was kind of where I was trying to build my client base. And after a couple of years, I left that firm and became more independent. And then after a couple of years of doing that, I went into a partnership with Home Federal Bank. And I was with Home Federal Bank for about 10 years or so, I think it was. And then I left there and went back independent. And so I've kind of moved around a little bit, but always been here in Grand Island and always been, in the same business. And I've got clients from that I've had for 20 years that have followed me around. And so just continue to, be blessed with the opportunity.
Very cool. At what point in time um, did you kind of get into politics and like thinking about running for mayor of Grand Isle? Like, what was your thought process there? And just take me behind the scenes of that time period.
Well, I think it was kind of a progression of things. I've always gravitated towards leadership. I was blessed with being around some really wonderful leaders. Going back to high school, my high school football coach was terrific. A gentleman by the name of Ken Fisher, and Ken did a lot for me. He's the one that put it into play for me to have an opportunity to go be a Husker. And so I really was indebted to him. And then, obviously, being at the university and being around Tom Osborne, it's hard not to, kind of look at him as somebody to really aspire to be. And, I guess I was always the type of person, the type of kid that stepped to the front of the line. I got involved with coaching, and I was working up at the high school as a volunteer for a couple of years. The boys soccer program was kind of teetering a little bit, I would say. Had a really good guy that was the high school coach, but he really wasn't a soccer guy, but very well intentioned. And he reached out to a couple of us and said, "Hey, would you guys come and help me out?" And so we did. And I just volunteered. I didn't get a paycheck or anything for a couple of years. I just showed up, and it was great because Scotty just kind of turned it over to us and let us kind of run the program. And I think it was 2017. He decided to step away. His kids were, or excuse me, 2007. His kids were stepping away and going to play baseball and do some different things. And he wanted to spend more time with his kids. And Joe Cutlass, the athletic director, asked me to come in and visit with him about the coaching opportunity. And I thought he was going to kind of pick my brain on what they should look for in trying to find another coach, because I didn't realize, I wasn't a teacher, and I didn't realize that you could be involved on coaching staffs without being a teacher, and he offered me the job. And I was taken back a little bit from it. I had to kind of look to go to my wife and ask her if she was okay with it. And it was a great decision. My kids all grew up with the program. So I had a chance to lead these young people for, a number of years and build really good relationships with them. In some situations, you become almost a quasi-father figure. I mean, all those things, the stability that they needed. And so through that and just some other things, my name was passed around to, I think, some people that are involved in politics. I went to Lincoln and visited with some folks by invitation about running for some let's say highly visible positions within the United States government. And I just didn't, I didn't register that. I didn't think that was something that I wanted to do. And before I left that meeting, though, they said, okay, we really would like you to at least give consideration to looking locally and getting involved locally. And I thought, yeah, okay, maybe. And I drove home from Lincoln, and kind of time passed. And then I didn't really have the desire to be on the city council or anything like that. But then there was a lot of talk about the mayor's position and kind of things that we needed to move our city forward and kind of move past some things that had happened in the past. And I kind of kicked around the idea. I talked to a handful of my friends, and I kept it on the down low. But I was trying to find somebody to talk me out of it, and nobody did. And I literally walked into the office to file the paperwork an hour before the filing deadline, back in 10 plus years ago now. And I had no idea what I was doing for sure. I'd never been involved in politics. I didn't for sure know how all the city operated, but I was pretty good with budgets and math, and I thought pretty good in terms of leadership. Thought I was a pretty good communicator. And I just thought, what the hell? It's my hometown. If I lived anywhere else, I wouldn't have done it. But this was my hometown. So I kind of went down that path again, not knowing what to expect. I didn't run a traditional campaign. I didn't go out and raise a ton of money. I didn't have a big committee. It was essentially me and my wife and my money. I kicked in $5,000, my own money, to run this. And there were some people that contributed a little bit, but I didn't do yard signs, and I didn't talk about negativity. I didn't talk about my opponents necessarily. I just said, hey, I'm a Grand Island kid. This is kind of my background. I think I can bring some new ideas to this, and give me a shot. And after the primary was over, I realized that, boy, this is a reality. And then the general election came, and I remember sitting at the chocolate bar for my campaign party with friends and family, and everybody had left, and Tracy Overstreet worked for the Independent at the time, and she said, hey, can I, I've kind of left you alone this whole night. Can we sit and talk now? And I said, yeah, just let me get a drink and we'll sit down and we'll chat. And I just remember her saying, you've been like this through this entire process. There's got to be something that's really, concerning for you. And I said, yeah, there is. I don't know how the hell I'm going to run those meetings. I don't understand Robert's Rules of Order. And she tossed her pen down, and she got like, you got to be kidding me. All the things that you got to deal with. And that's what I was like, yeah, so it was a heck of a lot of fun. I'm going to tell you, I really enjoyed the opportunity of being the mayor. And again, it was my hometown. And so I had a lot of pride in doing it. And I was very authentic with it. And I exposed my family to it. Very transparent. I really tried to peel the onion back on everything. And I had a really good relationship with people. And I would say 90+% of the people probably thought that I did a good job. What I also learned was you're never going to make everybody happy, so don't even try. And I also learned that it's important just to be open and transparent and not be an ear pleaser. So that's where I kind of developed the skill of being able to, have a mindset, just making sure that this is who I am and this is what I have to say. And if you don't like it, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. And so that's kind of where we're at. And so, I get to the point though where after about 3 years, my kids were at the ages where I didn't want to do it for another 4 years. We were really a busy family. I felt like I had done the city a good positive service. And I made it very known that I didn't have the intention of continuing. The thing that I was really disappointed with, not that Roger was the only one that wanted the job, but I was really disappointed that nobody else did. I think Mayor Steele's done a fine job since he's taken over, but I couldn't believe that a community of 50,000 people and that only one person wanted it. It was an honor to do it. And if my kids were a different age, I probably would have continued doing it. But it was troubling to me that couldn't get somebody else to want that position. And I've been very vocal and a huge advocate of trying to encourage people to get involved and put your name on a ballot and have a little bit of gumption. And this is where you live, step forward and serve. And people just don't want that. And so that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So, when you ran, you said you had a very simple campaign. That actually remember that stuck out to me as something when you said that at Bar Middle School, like over 15 years ago. You didn't do signs. You didn't do signs in your campaign. So what was the running process like? How many people did you run against, and like walk me through like the campaigning process?
Yeah, there were just three of us that were running in the primary. But the irony is it was the incumbent mayor, the incumbent president of the city council, and just some guy, me. I was younger, younger than the other two. I had different ideas. I had a young family, different background. It was really though where I think a lot of people understood the power of social media. I didn't need to rent billboard space. I didn't put lots of things in the paper. I didn't put campaign yard signs all over the place. I use social media. And my other two opponents didn't understand it. And I was able to get an authentic message out to an awful lot of people in a hurry. And, the thing that I'm really proud of is that Grand Island is divided into voting precincts, so geographically, and I won every one of them in the general election. And I did that by also understanding that in the general election, the person that I was in the campaign against was somebody that I was going to end up working with for the next 4 years. So I was really, there were a lot of people that wanted me to go after my opponent. And I didn't, number one, I didn't feel the need. I didn't think that was necessary, but it really just wasn't what I wanted to put forward to also then have a working relationship with this individual who is influential and has a very solid, steady voice on that city council. And so I don't now, and I didn't then agree with everything that this individual would bring forward in council chambers, but that's okay. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I still respect him and like him, and if I see him in the grocery store today, I'm going to say hello. I mean, so that's the way government's supposed to work, though. Edge. I mean, it's not supposed to be, behind closed doors and unanimous voting and all of the things that made me really, really concerned and upset about our public schools.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. What was your typical day like as mayor? So remind me the years you were mayor again, and then what was your day like? What were some initiatives that you tackled during that time period?
So 2014 to 2018 is when I served as mayor. And so I'm really diligent with my time management. So that's the first thing that I need to let you know, is because I still had many, many roles that I was taking during that 4 year period of time. I was running a city, but I also had a thriving financial advising practice. I was a dad, I was a husband, and I was still a soccer coach. And on top of that, I was establishing a youth soccer program as well. So all of this stuff needed to be balanced and make sure that things didn't fall through the cracks. And that's where my time management skills were really important. The thing that I would also, I'm proud to say, is that I still only worked 4 days a week usually. One of the, I've hired a business coach in the past, and I really understand how to delegate. I really understand how to build teams, and I was able to do that in all of those different positions, whether it was my coaching staff at the high school. I had a lot of trust and faith in their abilities, whether it was my staff at my business, whether it was my staff at City Hall, all those things. And I made sure that I prioritized my family activities, my kids' activities, and I tried to take a free day every week, where it was just a day, a lot of me time, time to recharge, a lot of time to go do what I wanted to do, because I didn't want to let my life run me ragged. And so when I was doing all that, still having the ability to find time in that wasn't always easy, but you and I wouldn't say I batted 1,000 on it, but 9 out of 10 times weeks that was the way it was. And I'd block it off on my calendar, and I would just tell my people on all my teams, don't contact me. I mean, unless something really major is happening, I'm gone. I'm off the grid today. You need to handle it. And so that was empowering, though, for a lot of people as well. And it helped me build my team with really good people around me.
That's interesting. So, because this is something I'm thinking about a lot too, currently, just in my life, just as a kind of a younger guy starting off my career. What are some tips you would have to people trying to increase productivity, delegate better, and kind of do what you were able to do? I mean, juggling so many things at once and doing it successfully, that's crazy how you're able to handle all that. So do you have any tips?
Well, I'm a very visual person, number one. I mean, a dry erase board is like one of my biggest friends. I love to draw, and it doesn't matter if I'm drawing in a locker room with a team in front of me, or if I'm drawing on the wall with a client in front of me. I really tried to, to diagram as much as I can. But for me, it's just about priorities. You talk to people and they will openly say, I don't have time. Well, I just call BS. Don't tell me you don't have time. Tell me it's not a priority, but don't tell me you don't have time. And I think when you figure out what your priorities are, and then for me, it's an HPA, and it's an acronym for high payoff activity. If it's not something that's meaningful, I try to eliminate as many time wasters as I possibly can. I mean, it's pretty easy to grab your phone and look at Twitter or whatever it is, and just find excuses or reason to not get things done. And some of that's human nature. I'm not perfect. I mean, my goodness, I do that all the time as well still, but I prioritize what it is that I need. And when I go into something, I also don't do it half-heartedly. You're going to get all of it. And so, that's the way I coach. It's the way I run my business. It's the way I went into politics. It's the way I live pretty much every day. And so I'm unapologetically opinionated and also vocal. I think, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And some people think that I'm just an arrogant prick. That's okay. I don't care. I mean, the other thing that I get to what's really refreshing is when you get to the point in your life where you don't care how everybody, views you. That's great, because I mean, you ultimately are still, the one that's in charge of your day-to-day life, and that's just who I am. And if authenticity is bad for people, that's on them, not me.
Mm-hmm. What are some of your proudest accomplishments as mayor?
Well, I think that first and foremost for me, it was the method in which that I got there, being a GI boy, coming, through all the trials and tribulations, and just diving into it and saying, you know what, I want to take on this responsibility, and then being able to get to that point. And then once I got to that point, it was really important not to screw it up, right? I didn't want a legacy of being that guy that really was just a complete disaster for us. And I think I made it through that as well. My kids had wonderful experiences with it. If I look back on policy and things, one of the things that we put together essentially a balanced budget resolution because I had a lot of financial concerns about where the city was going when I first took over because we were spending more than what we were bringing in, and the amount of our expenses was growing faster than what our revenue was. And I didn't need a PhD in economics to understand that that was not sustainable. And so I was very transparent about the tough decisions that were going to have to be made. So I was proud that we were able to get through a budget process where now, from that point forward, it's always about balancing the budget. And I think also it was really, really a political hot button when I was running and took over because of the veterans home being relocated to Kearney. And I very openly said that I wasn't going to attempt to work with newly elected Governor Pete Ricketts to reverse a decision by Governor Dave Heineman. It just wasn't going to happen. It was fool's gold to tell the people of Grand Island that this is what we needed to do. And so I would put my foot down and I said, no, we're going to move forward with this and we're going to make the proverbial lemonade out of the lemons. And so I worked with the governor, and within a year's period of time, the governor actually and I stood in the Capitol, and the governor gave back that property to the city of Grand Island. That was the best that we were going to get, and I needed to accomplish that. And within a year, we had that done. So all of the things that you see, I know it takes time, and I know people get frustrated with it, but all of the things that are happening out there now are because of that. And I'm really proud of that. I'm also, I think back to sitting in council chambers, and a lot of times, tax increment financing was a hot button, and people wanted to holler about it, and they always thought it was like welfare for the rich people, and they don't understand how it works. And I cast the deciding vote of a deal that is now at the corner of Highway 281 and 34, where the new hospital's at. That used to be a cornfield. Without my deciding vote, that would still be a cornfield. And so I think about all of the development that is taking place on the south side of our town now, really, really critical for the city's future. And that wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have done that. I always told people that it baffled me that the communities, if you go from Nebraska, kind of western Nebraska, and you look and start at Ogallala and Ogallala, North Platte, Lexington, Kearney, skip Grand Island, go to York, Lincoln, what do all those communities have in common? Well, they grew towards the interstate, and they captured the 25,000 or more cars that drive by every day. They capture the tax revenue, they capture the business, the commerce, everything that comes off the interstate. And for whatever reason, Grand Island grew towards Caro, and we needed to figure out a way to get our community south and get it out to the interstate. And that was kind of that project where the new hospital's at's been the catalyst to getting things going to the south. Definitely really proud of that. I'm just, and frankly, I'm proud of all the people that we had on our team. I had a wonderful, wonderful city administrator that made my life really easy. I had great department heads that I trusted tremendously. They did a great job. They made me look good. And so all of that, when I walked out, I was really proud of what it was that we accomplished over that 4 years. So yeah, it was a great period of time for me.
Yeah. Well, so obviously you were able to handle a lot of different, you're being coach, your business, being mayor. What was your typical day like? I mean, obviously there wasn't probably a typical day, so maybe a typical week, but I'm curious what that was kind of like.
Yeah, I mean, it was all blocked out in time. I ran two calendars, my calendar at work that my office staff had, a calendar at City Hall that my staff there had. They synced up, they talked to each other. So that way, my staff at City Hall could see what my calendar at my office and so on and so forth. And then I would time block it. I would block it off. And so my team at my business knew that when clients needed to schedule appointments to come see me, these were the periods of times that would work. These were kind of the times that were off limits because we had, commitments with the city. And so it was a typical day. I was usually back and forth at both locations at some point in time. If I went down to City Hall, I took my laptop with me for work-related stuff. So if I needed to, I could jump on my laptop and I could place trades or send cash or whatever was needed for clients out of accounts. I never took my City Hall laptop with me to my other office. I didn't, I guess, really feel the need for that. But I mean, it was because of technology. It was able to work. I don't think I would have been able to do it in 1990. The world that we live in, you can be pretty mobile and be able to do all that stuff. And so, I would get up and around, about the time kids were going to school. I mean, I didn't get up at 6 and start my day then. I just kind of was a normal dad, take kids to school if needed, get to the office, and usually by 5, I tried to be home unless we had a council meeting or if I was meeting with clients in an evening. And again, trying to take a free day. Tried to be out and about as much as I could, though I wanted to be visible. Always gave as much accommodation to the media as I could. But I always made sure that I kept the two different hats separate. I didn't talk about business at City Hall, and I didn't talk about City Hall at my other office. From time to time, clients would ask me kind of how things were going with a budget process or a contract negotiation, but not anything major. And so, it was just I got to be honest with you, Mitch. I think I just didn't know any better, and you just kind of figure it out as you go. And there wasn't a playbook for it. I didn't have somebody that was training me. I played ignorance a couple times with just trying to figure out how everything worked. But if I've always Coach Osborne used to tell us that if you surround yourself with good people and work hard, good things will happen. And I really tried to put myself around the best people possible, and I had really good people that I trusted. And sometimes you miss. You trust and it doesn't work out. That's okay, but you figure it out and you just keep moving forward. And I guess that's kind of been how I've lived ever since I've been out of college.
That's interesting, just because I feel like post COVID, the thought of being able to balance both is more acceptable, or more like oh yeah, we're mobile, we have our laptops. But pre-COVID, that was probably very forward thinking, the way that you were able to handle your business being mayor, or just so I find that interesting, because I think in a post-COVID world, we're just so used to that now. But I'm sure then it was just this is very new. But
like I said, you make the best out of the situation. I ran, I won, I had a responsibility. I also had a responsibility to the people that I managed their life savings for, and I also had a responsibility for my wife and kids at home, and I had a responsibility for all the kids that I coached. And so I didn't want to fumble any of those. And so you pivot, you adjust, you see what's working, you see what's not, and you go with it.
Definitely. What does life look like since 2018? Kind of, you're still running your practice. You're involved in the chaperone. Tell me a little bit about all of those things.
Well, I would tell you that I kind of, when I stepped away from City Hall, I thought, I just want to kind of fall back into the shadow a little bit. Well, that didn't happen at all. Governor Ricketts called me first and foremost, and knew that I was not going to be the mayor anymore, and his office gave me an opportunity to represent Grand Island on the board of the Nebraska State Fair. And so that was kind of the first thing that I dove back into, and I reluctantly did it. I told them no a couple times at first, and I remember my youngest daughter telling me, "Dad, you need to do it, because that way we get to still go to the fair, and you get that really good parking spot still." And so, the Governor Ricketts's office, his chief of staff, really sold it to me. It was like, "Jeremy, you're in Grand Island. You don't need to travel for monthly meetings. You're well known in the community. It just, well, why not?" And I thought, what, fine. It's the Nebraska State Fair. This will be a piece of cake. Wrong. Oh my gosh. That was a mistake. That was a mistake taking that position, because I walked into a complete disaster. And I'm going to try to choose my words carefully here, but it was an organization that was just absolutely off the rails. And I think that there are well-intentioned people that were involved, but just didn't know what to look for. And to make a really long story short, we found fraud and theft. And a key executive, I was on the finance committee, and Mitch, immediately I knew something was up. It didn't pass the smell test, and I started asking questions, and it started me down a rabbit hole that honestly it was a place I didn't want to go, and it really caused a lot of friction. We had to get obviously the authorities involved. We had a split board, and we had certain board members that, let's just say, nepotism and different things. The way things were run, it was run amok, and that's funded with taxpayer money substantially from the state, but also at the local level. And we live in a world right now where Elon Musk is being villainized for Doge and the waste, fraud, and abuse. Well, I was kind of the Elon of the Nebraska State Fair, and all of the forensic accounting that we did was not what people wanted to hear. And there was a very concerted effort to hold one person responsible for that. And they picked the wrong person. I mean, I'm sorry, I got accused of having an extramarital affair with this person and all kinds of wild things because I just didn't buy the BS, and I knew what it looked like. And the way certain people handled that entire situation was just grotesque, and I didn't want to be part of it. And I told the governor, I said, you need to find a replacement because I'm done. I'm not going to be affiliated with this. I don't want my name attached to this. And so he did. Now, I'm hopeful that things have gotten better. I don't know. I have a hard time with it. It should be the crown jewel of our community. I mean, Grand Island, Nebraska, home of the Nebraska State Fair. I mean, I'm a Grand Island guy. I was the mayor, talked about all the things that we need to do to bring people to Grand Island. And it just absolutely floored me. And so I didn't want to be a part of it, though. It was that bad. And so I'm hopeful that things have cleaned up. We've got a new executive director, and I know who she is, and I think she's an admirable lady, and definitely very high level of ethics. I think I think she's doing a good job as far as I know. But I do know that there are people involved behind the scenes, the shadow puppets that control certain people on the board, that it was a bad scenario. So anyway, that being said, I left there, and we had the COVID situation, we had all this other, and really, my life really changed. And it changed when school was back, and I'm telling you, the kids in the schools and the environment within the schools, particularly the high school and the middle schools, was just abysmal. And it got to a point where I had teachers and folks calling me about players and problems that we'd never experienced before. And I just started asking a lot of questions. And I've got clients that are teachers. And the level of just absolute dysfunction was astounding to me. So much so where I asked a couple other varsity coaches if they were feeling the same way. And they said absolutely, and it wasn't just then that they were getting to that point. So myself and three other varsity coaches, we really took it upon ourselves to really dive into this. And I told them, I said, hey, I can get a audience with Tawana Grover anytime that I want. I'll be the one that delivers this, so that way it doesn't put you guys in a precarious position because your teacher's here as well. But let's do all the legwork. Let's figure out what's going on. And so in September of 2021, the four of us put together, I think it was like a 16-page document, and there was all kinds of stuff in there. Testimonies from teachers, I mean, you name it. I mean, it was there. And we met with Grover and her team in October, and we then sent the entire document to the entire Board of Education, because I thought it was important for the Board of Education to understand what was happening behind the scenes, because you don't ever hear any of this stuff and anybody talking about it, and they sure as heck didn't talk about it at board meetings. And so we sent the entire report to the Board of Education, and 48 hours later, I got a reply from Bonnie Hinkle, who is the president of the board, that said, "We're not interested in hearing about this. We trust Dr. Grover to handle it." And it really, really set me off. Those 9 people are elected to represent the citizens of Grand Island. And the only thing that they're really, truly responsible for is setting policy and overseeing one specific person, and that's the superintendent. And they just basically said, "We don't care." I wasn't a helicopter parent, Mitch. I mean, I was what I thought a pretty well-respected varsity coach, as well as a past mayor. I mean, all these different hats that I wore. And for it just to be discounted was absolutely insulting. And I knew in October that this thing was going off the rails. It was going to get bad. And so at that point in time, my wife and I, we started looking at moving we looked at moving to Gretna. We looked at moving to Kearney. We looked at maybe getting our kids out of the public schools and maybe enrolling at Central Catholic. I mean, we kind of examined all that. But it wasn't until that upcoming then year, I was at the 8th grade activities fair before our season started. So I think it was probably February. And one of the counselors came up to me and said, "Hey, Coach Jensen, I just need you to know that there's probably going to be a situation where maybe 4 of your players aren't eligible, this year." And I just nuked on this poor gal. And I've apologized since, but I'd tried to get the schools to do some different things and to give me access to these kids' information so I could track their grades and their attendance and the stuff. And I was ignored. And it just felt like it was a losing battle. And I had so many teachers that were reaching out to me that were just at their wits' end, and people that were, the public schools was spinning it as we were going to have a massive, massive shortage of teachers. And the reason why is just because there's not enough new teachers that are coming out of college. And it was complete crap. That's true, but they had zero concern about why all the teachers that we already had were leaving. And I made that essentially kind of my lightning rod and started talking about, because these teachers needed a voice. Their union wasn't doing it for them. They were scared. They couldn't talk about it without fear of retribution themselves. And I was pissed because I've grown up here. I went through the schools. I've coached there. I saw things and I knew things as a coach that never got communicated to any parents. And I thought it was absolutely a mess. We had a lack of leadership at middle schools, like Barr was a complete disaster. The high school had turned into a complete just mess. And there was zero leadership, and our board didn't care to understand it. And what really then set me off was that these surveys that the district was given to all of these kids, and they never shared what the survey said after the fact. What the hell's the point of doing a survey if you don't share the results? Well, you don't share the results when the output does not meet your expectations or makes you look bad. And that's exactly what was happening, Mitch. And so this stuff got shared with me because I talked to a lot of people in the buildings and they knew how upset I was. And they also knew that I had a voice. And these, the infamous screenshots that they claim was this personal information. Well, one of the screenshots was an aggregate number that asked the kids up at Grand Island Senior High, of which approximately 2,000 of them completed the survey. 52% of the kids surveyed said they didn't feel safe in the building. That wasn't shared. That wasn't shared with the board. It wasn't shared publicly. It wasn't shared with the parents. It was hidden. Why? Because that's alarming. You got a problem if half the kids in a building that size don't feel safe being there. And I was disgusted with how everything was going. And I said, you know what? I don't care. I don't know that they're going to be dumb enough to fire me, but maybe. But I'm going to share this information because people have a right to know. And then all hell broke loose, as you know. And so, they made the decision to fire me. They gave me the choice to resign or be terminated. And I looked at them. I said, well, I sure as hell ain't going to resign. And, it was a 2-minute meeting and I walked out of there. And at that point in time, it was like, okay, now I have a responsibility. I have a responsibility. You've taken my muzzle off. And there were a lot of people that were really pissed about this, about how I handled it. But the irony behind this, Mitch, is that nobody from Grand Island Public Schools ever said that the information that I was sharing was not correct. They just didn't like how I was sharing it. And I didn't care at that point in time. The board was absolutely asleep at the wheel. I immediately said all 9 of them need to be gone. You don't allow your job being elected to represent the people of Grand Island on that board is to make sure that crap doesn't happen. And if it is happening, okay, talk about it. Let the community know what's going on. Work to find a solution. None of that was happening. It was so bad, the environment there, that at that point I was just like, I really don't care. And so when that happened, I really, if you know anything about me, I hold a big chip on my shoulder. And at that point in time, it was funny because everybody's like, well, are you going to run for school board? And I said, no, I'm not. I just got off of a board that I was in the minority on. And, I wasn't going to subject myself to that situation again. Sure, I could have ran and won a spot on a board. And I would have been one of 9 people, and I would have sat there and banged my head into the table, just like I did with the Nebraska State Fair. And all that would have got accomplished was they would have just said, it's just the pissed off soccer coach, blah, blah, blah. No, I said, I'm going to organize the community. We're going to create something that's bigger than all of us. And we're going to make sure that people understand that our public schools are a protected asset and our kids are a protected asset. And I had an enormous amount of people that reached out and said, how are we going to do this? And I said, just give me a little bit of time. And we figured it out. I got some great people involved. And let's see, that was in April of 2022. By June of 2022, we had launched Chaperone. We had the tax ID. We had all the papers filed. We had the marketing done. We went out and we found really good people that wanted to be involved, both as people helping us, but also as candidates. And we were really up against it. And we were like, you know what? We've missed the filing deadline. We got write-ins. We got all. There's no way in hell we're going to win these elections, right? But we're just going to go prove a point. And I was like, no. We're in this to win it, and we're going to figure out a way to do it. And by God, in November, in election night. Actually, let me back up. In October, we fired off one of the most powerful things that I think that our city has seen. And it was an eye-opener to a lot of people. 221 teachers completed a survey for us, and we shared the results of that survey. And GIPS just absolutely lost their mind. And the irony is that they do surveys all the time, but they don't ever tell you what they say. And we get a survey done and we show the results, and everybody's just like, you got to be kidding me. We had no idea. We had no idea. And so then we go into November and we overwhelmingly win these elections. We get 3 outstanding people on that board. And that was way more impactful to me than me just running and me being, in there hollering about it. And then we had, a couple people that were what I would call independent of the board. And next thing you know, the board, kind of the balance has changed. And the funny thing is that a month later, Tawana Grover decides she just doesn't want to be a part of this anymore. Tells you everything you need to know in my mind. And, she negotiated, or I don't know if negotiated is the word, but got herself a hell of a golden parachute from the taxpayers of Grand Island, said she's going to go spend more time with her family, and a month later she's, in Iowa as a superintendent. And so, when I go back, whenever my time comes that I leave this earth and people think about the things that I was involved with and that I was most impactful with, I think Chaperone's going to be right up there, because this was something that I was just absolutely humbled by the amount of support that came with that.
Yeah. That's an incredible story. I appreciate you sharing kind of all of that, how it all came to be. I have a hard cutoff. I wish I didn't. I appreciate your time, Jeremy. We should do this again sometime. But yeah, thank you for taking the time to join, share your story. It's been a good time chatting with you, and just wish you all the best. So thank you.
Mitch, let me in this. You're a young person. Yep. You got to get these kids, I call you guys kids, you got to get people involved. And you got to have a voice, and you got to understand where you stand on things, and you got to make sure that you're doing everything that you can to be impactful as well. So I just encourage you guys all, whoever's watching this, to look in the mirror and figure out how you can make an impact. So thanks, I appreciate it. It's been good.
100%. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Have a good one, Jeremy.
All right, you too.